Good stuff there about the wide receiver group. I think you've mentioned this a lot. It's a lot more complicated of a position than people give it credit for. They think, oh, well, hey, just teach them to run a post or teach them to run a go route or whatever,
Other
right?
people know that too, right?
Right, yeah. But also, even if they do know those things, it's really hard. And this is kind of one of the impressive things about Coach Rhule and his staff to me is their confidence in being able to take a guy from being just an athlete, a guy that maybe hasn't played that much football, and actually having the ability to go through and teach them all the things you talked about, right? Because that's the hard part.
And wide receivers never get criticized for like not finishing at the top of their route. Like when you're done, you're not open yet. Like again, running through the catch or giving yourself working room. If I'm running a fade and I straighten you up DB, I don't want to fade when I look up. I don't want to fade unless the ball takes me there because I want working room.
Yeah, you need.
So once I straighten you up, I don't want to be running at an angle. I want to straighten you up and then fade to that pylon to give myself as much space as possible.
Anything, right? You kind of want to bring the DB inside so that you give your quarterback a lot of space to make that throw so you can fade if you have to.
And I talk about it like it's a lot easier than it really is. It is one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most difficult football skills ever. But moving to the outfield and returning punts.
So returning punts is the one that I thought about.
Returning
punts is the one I thought about when you were talking about knowing that some guys
just tracking a ball in the air,
and then knowing that like, hey, while I'm not looking, I might get hammered here.
Yeah. That's
the thing that reminded me of is like, it's like a punt return.
Yep.
More than we realize, right?
And just, we call them like window catches, right? Where guys stick their arms out, thumbs in, and they picture catches is what we call them. And we chart them all the time for receiving groups because we know those are teams we can get the ball, we can knock the ball away. Because you get how DBs are taught now. They play through your arms.
Yeah, just rake the arms.
They rake your hands because the technique has changed with how you got to cover somebody.
Just blow somebody up anymore.
And they're elite level skill guys. So you kind of have to be, but you have to be in position enough to be able to pull those off. But those are like we count batted balls.
Yeah.
Right. And those are different than balls that you get your hands on where you can actually get a turn, get a takeaway. And, receivers got to own some of that too. Right. It's, like some of that ownership is on them. And I think it's difficult for young receivers to run through catches, run through the ball.
If you want to know how hard being a wide receiver is, I just go do their most basic skill. Look backwards and up and run.
I always tell people just go outside,
run in a straight line.
Yep, and
looking backwards and up.
Yep, and let me know what happens.
99% of the population can't do it.
Yep, you're gonna go to where your head takes you.
Yeah, and
so the minute you look up, it's gonna be like fade to black.
You're either gonna fall down or you're gonna end up about 8 yards out of bounds.
Yep,
that's how it's how I feel about hockey, right? Like the most basic thing in their sport, skating around, is harder than what most people can do just in regular like shoes on the street.
Well,
right?
My buddy Nate Coleman one day put me on the show for about a week. Went to the little place where Deal Field is off of Military.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like 70th and Military. There was a rink in there, and it hurt me like no other. And I'm like, you watch some of these guys the last 25, 30 years, it's like, especially as the sport of hockey has changed, where like skating is at a premium, and it is an unbelievable skill, and they do it in their sleep.
Yeah, it is just the bare. I think about it with like water polo too, like just treading water for 2 hours. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, brutal.
It's like when you can't do as a human, you can't do the basic thing that they do, and then do all their sports skills on top of that. I'm like, hey, hats off to you.
I like that, by the way. About eight. What is it? About eight yards out of bounds. That sounds like an album title right there.
No, you're thinking of Creed. That's 6 feet from the edge.
Oh, my bad.
Almost. You almost had it there.
Oh Lord, that's one of the reasons why. And I said this, and we're on the heels of young wide receivers, right? With Hayes committing and Jackson Carpenter. And I said this I was talking to Foreman about this. A guy like Jackson Carpenter, I don't care that I know his dad. I don't care that he was a teammate. Again, I'd rather be right than well liked. If Jackson Carpenter was at Millard South or Bellevue West, Jackson Carpenter is easily a 1,000-yard wide receiver. Now listen to what I'm telling you. He's a 1,000-yard wide receiver. He is an elite level athlete. His ability to change directions and go get a ball. He was a sophomore, and they were kicking our tail in the first half in the playoffs. And I remember in pregame, I just wanted to meet him because I knew he's a carpenter, right? And Lockjaw or Tim's his dad's is a great dude, and so I'm like, hey, your film is great, and they had an older quarterback, and I remember shout out to Keith Mann because when we were going to West Lafayette, it was my first roadie, and so it was a couple years ago, and Keith is really familiar with a lot of the teams in Lincoln and Southwest just played Millard West, and he and I are just sitting on the plane and we're talking about Carpenter and the players and Jamel's son, Williams, and just the type of game that it was. And I think Millard West ended up coming back to win that one or something like that happened. It was, like I said, it was 2 years ago. But anyway, we just kept, and I said, Carp's tape is nice. Like he's kind of sudden in and out of his breaks. He's pretty smooth. And he's like, yeah, if we just got to find ways to get him the ball. And I was like, oh, okay, that's neither here nor there. But then we ended up playing him. So, of course, you get the last X amount of games. If you're creative, you can get a few more in the old Huddle archive. I'm like, this dude is really, really – and they had another good wide receiver opposite him. So, light-skinned guy. I can't remember his name. But and so after that game, I walked over to him. This is totally unsolicited, right? I just walked over to him. I said, hey, I'm just telling you, bud, if you stay with this and this is what you want to do, in a few years, you'll be able to write your own check. He's very great. He's obviously Tim's wife must be fantastic because he's a good kid. He's like, appreciate that, sir, whatever. We're looking at this guy. I'm telling you, if he was anywhere else and had the number, because he doesn't have statistically, he doesn't have the numbers, but anywhere else, some school in Kansas or Missouri or wherever, and he'd be a 60 catch guy for like 900 yards. You'd be like, oh, he's
14 touchdowns.
Mark my words. And you know what? He's got a no disrespect to that offense, but he's got a freebie year to learn. He's so raw. He's incredible.
I mean, and that's the template of guys that Rhule wants, right?
Ask anybody from our secondary 2 years ago. Yeah.
As a sophomore,
he could run.
Yeah,
huge catch radius.
Well, he's 6 foot. He's 6'2", so he's a big kid.
He never lets it get. He's just. I'm sure as I'm sitting here on April 16th. Happy birthday, Mom. He is way better than any, and I'm not even going to say the critics because I don't think people just know enough. But don't get it twisted. This isn't some nice feel good. He offered
legacy offer or whatever.
It's not that.
Well,
it is not. He can flat out run, and he's explosive.
All you need to know is 6'2", ran a 10.700 as a sophomore.
Dude, I'm telling you,
10.7 as a sophomore is bonkers.
Wow, he can go get the. If I'm not telling anybody to coach. If he's, I'm getting this guy on tunnel screen, some smokes. He would be my slant guy. He can run. Just give me a little dig. Like he can snap guys off. I mean, my man's getting minimum 12, 13 targets a game.
That's a little extra bonus wide receiver talk of some of the incoming guys that have already committed to Nebraska's class. Garrett McGuire out there doing some work early on in the class here of 2025. All right, coming up next, we've got Steve Ashburner from NBA.com The play-in games start tonight. Gonna get a little preview of NBA postseason action here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.